I thought I knew everything about God and the afterlife. But an unexpected accident completely changed my mind. Now I can share a near-death experience that shattered all my beliefs about religion and eternity. My name is Layla. I'm 12 years old, and I live in a 2-story house in Lansing, Michigan, where I've lived my whole life. Before this event, I was an ordinary girl attending school, doing homework, and hanging out with friends. I grew up in a devout Muslim family. My faith was my foundation. I prayed 5 times a day with my family, fasted during Ramadan, and I strived to follow the teachings passed on to me that winter morning. That morning, everything began as usual. I was getting ready for school that winter morning. My parents were preparing breakfast. The television was on in the background, quietly reporting on a snowstorm forecast for the end of the week. I thought of reminding my parents to stock up on food after work. Everything seemed normal, but none of us knew that the EMS carbon monoxide detector was in the car. I began to feel dizzy as I checked my backpack, so as not to forget any books. I ignored it. I was tired, so I thought. My younger brother, Samir, was in the bath, and my mother was busy with the coffee. My father had left early for his job as an engineer in the city center. I was dizzy as I helped my mother put the dishes in the dishwasher. The room spun, and my vision blurred. I tried to ask her help, but I couldn't speak. I saw my mother's terrified face as I fell to the kitchen floor. I crawled to my phone on the counter with trembling hands. I could barely speak, but I gave our address before the phone slipped out of my hands. This call saved my family. The fire department arrived within minutes and found dangerous levels of carbon monoxide throughout the house. They removed us until I was unconscious and barely breathing. My brother Samir had passed out in the shower, and my mother was irresponsive on the kitchen floor. The kitchen floor. I dialed the number, my hands shaking as I struggled to speak. I gave our address, and the call ended abruptly when the phone slipped from my grasp. I later learned that this call was a matter of life or death. The fire department arrived swiftly and found dangerous levels of carbon monoxide throughout the house. They evacuated us until I was unconscious and barely breathing. My brother Samir had passed out in the shower, and my mother was unresponsive on the kitchen floor. My heart had stopped for 4 minutes and 37 seconds in the ambulance. I was clinically dead. What happened in those minutes felt like an eternity and changed everything I knew about life and death and what comes after. Now, I realize that my whole life prepared me for that moment. All those years of praying with my family, learning about my faith, and accepting every teaching without question prepared me for what I was about to experience. The doctor said it was a miracle that I made that call when I did. If I had taken even a few minutes more, none of us would have survived. I know now that it wasn't just luck that saved us. Something bigger, something more powerful was protecting us. Have you ever wondered if your beliefs really lead to the ultimate truth? If this resonates with you, stay with us. The answers you seek may be here. What happened next felt like a divine encounter, something destined to reveal truths I never expected to discover. I had always seen my life as a series of rules to be followed to the letter, prayed at the right times, and behaved. My parents were right. As the daughter of devout Muslim parents, my life and decisions were shaped by my faith. They emphasized the importance of being a good person according to the teachings they passed on to me. They met at the Islamic Center of Lansing during a community event and shared the same vision of raising their children in the faith with values. Growing up, I heard many stories about how my family worked hard to maintain our traditions and beliefs. Islamic school on weekends, my parents were devout Muslims, and their teachings were ingrained in my life. They emphasized the importance of being a good person, and they met at the Islamic Center of Lansing during a community event. They shared the same vision of raising their children in the faith with values. I heard many stories about how my family worked hard to maintain our traditions and beliefs. We went to Islamic school on weekends, and we studied Arabic and our religion diligently. Everything I knew, everything I believed in, revolved around these teachings. I thought that was all I needed to live an upright life, but what I was about to experience would teach me that life and faith are much deeper and more complex than I could ever have imagined. My life was full of challenges, moments of confusion, and encounters with people who lived in very different ways from my parents' teachings. But as I lay unconscious, I realized something much bigger was unfolding. I felt myself floating above my body in the ambulance, the paramedics working frantically, their voices muffled. I noticed details I never would have otherwise. I saw a coffee stain on one of their sleeves and a crack in the ambulance roof that looked like a question mark. Then everything went dark. You know the kind of darkness you see when you close your eyes, but this was different. It was heavy, palpable, and felt alive somehow. I felt an invisible force pulling me deeper into the darkness, which was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was dense. I saw a coffee stain on one of their sleeves and a crack in the ambulance roof that looked like a question mark. Then everything went dark. You know the kind of darkness you see when you close your eyes, but this was different. It was a heavy, palpable void that seemed alive. I felt myself being pulled, drawn deeper into it by an invisible force. The darkness was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was dense, suffocating, and yet filled with an undeniable. Suddenly, I was no longer alone. Something was with me. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was an angel. It wasn't the kind of angel you see on greeting cards, with soft wings and shiny halos. This angel was powerful, ancient, and its mere presence made my soul tremble. The angel didn't speak with words. Instead, my mind was flooded with images, feelings, and an understanding. The first thing the angel showed me was my whole life, spread out like a carpet. I saw every choice I'd ever made, not only the actions themselves. I saw a being so powerful and ancient that its mere presence made my soul tremble. It didn't speak with words. Instead, my mind was flooded with images, feelings, and an understanding. The angel showed me my whole life, spread out like a carpet. I saw every choice I'd ever made, not only the actions themselves, but also the effects they had on others. I saw moments I had forgotten, like when I said something unpleasant to a colleague and how it affected his mood for the rest of the day. I also saw the day that I helped an elderly neighbor pick up something he had dropped and how that small act gave him hope. What impressed me most was seeing how my devotion to what I believed was right sometimes led people away from the truth. I saw cases of encouraging others to follow stricter religious practices, thinking that I was helping, but what I saw was the opposite. My well-intentioned advice had become a barrier, making it harder for them to connect with the deeper truths. I wanted to defend myself, argue that my intentions were, but in the presence of this divine being, all my excuses seemed meaningless. The angel didn't stop there. He showed me scenes from history, the truth about the Prophet Muhammad that I had never been taught. He taught me things that had been hidden or altered over time. Time revealed a clear understanding of my faith and origins. These revelations were presented to help me see the truth. As the darkness around us transformed, I noticed countless other souls moving within it. Some were drawn upwards towards a radiant light. Others descended, their forms becoming weaker and weaker as they descended. The angel explained that each soul's path was a direct result of their life, beliefs, and choices. Then, the angel drew my attention to the souls descending into the void. I saw more than I could have imagined. It was heartbreaking. It was intense, a physical force among them. I recognized faces from my own life. Brother Karen, who had led prayers in our mosque for years, holding his rosary as his soul descended, darkened by a terrible realization. Sister Fatima, who taught Quran classes to the children of our community, her face frozen in the same horrible awareness. It was something I had never imagined. All our devotion and rituals had not been enough. I was shocked to find the souls of children among the dead, including some from my community. Unlike the adults, these children were being drawn upwards toward the light. Angel explained that these children remained innocent, uncorrupted by false beliefs. This mercy brought me comfort, but I also felt deep sadness knowing that many parents would never see their children again. As we moved spiritually, I noticed something strange. Some souls carried chains made of light. These were not physical chains, but symbolic, forged from beliefs, traditions and practices to which they had attached themselves. Then I saw my own chains. They glowed with Arabic calligraphy and Islamic symbols. Beautiful but unbearably heavy, I could feel that they were pulling me down, and for the first time I understood how much they had really held me back. I saw my own chains. They glowed with Arabic calligraphy and Islamic symbols. Beautiful but unbearably heavy, they pulled me down. I understood how much they had really held me back. I saw a great hall of pure light. Souls stood before a judge whose presence was so sacred and bright that I couldn't look directly at him. The lives of each soul were examined, not only their actions but also what they had chosen to believe when the truth was made available to them. I watched as a woman I recognized from our mosque faced her trial. She was shown every moment she had met Christian missionaries. I saw a great hall of pure light. Souls stood before a judge whose presence was so sacred and bright that I couldn't look directly at him. The lives of each soul were examined, not only their actions but also what they had chosen to believe when the truth was made available to them. I watched as a woman I recognized from our mosque faced her trial. She was shown every moment she had met Christian missionaries, every time she passed a church or heard the message of the gospel, but dismissed it. Those moments stood as witnesses against her. The truth had been there, but she had chosen to ignore it. When it came my turn, every prayer I recited, every lesson I taught about Jesus was just a prophet. And every time I dismissed the Bible as corrupted, everything was laid bare before me. The weight of my error was overwhelming. I passed churches and heard the gospel, but dismissed it. Those moments stood as witnesses against her. The truth had been there, but she had chosen to ignore it. When it was my turn, every prayer I recited, every lesson I taught about Jesus, was just a prophet. And every time I dismissed the Bible as corrupted, everything was laid bare before me. The weight of my error was overwhelming, but unlike the judgments I had witnessed, mine was not final. The angel communicated that everything that was being shown had a purpose. I was being given the chance to return and share what I had learned, but first I needed to see much more. We began to light up towards the light above as we climbed. I felt the chains of false beliefs begin to loosen their grip, and the light became stronger. The light grew stronger, but it wasn't harsh or blinding. It felt like I was being bathed in pure love. As we lit what seemed to be different levels or realms, each one more beautiful than the last, the angel made it clear that these weren't the multiple heavens I had been taught in Islam. Then I saw him, Jesus Christ, not as I had known him until through Islamic teachings. Light became stronger. It wasn't harsh or blinding. It felt like I was being bathed in pure love. We lit different levels or realms, each one more beautiful than the last. The angel made it clear that these were not the multiple heavens I had been taught in Islam. Then I saw him, Jesus Christ, not just a prophet or a good man, but God himself. His presence was filled with love so powerful that I felt powerful. I felt I could disintegrate. The lies I believed about him fell like leaves blown by a strong wind. I understood the truth of the Trinity. I saw that he was not just a prophet or a good man, but God himself. His presence was filled with love so powerful that I felt it. I understood the truth of the Trinity, not three gods as separate entities, but one God in three persons. It was like trying to explain colors to someone who has only seen black and white. You can't really understand until you. When I stood before him, everything I thought I knew was shattered. Jesus wasn't just a prophet, he wasn't merely a righteous man or a teacher, he was God, the source of love and light that enveloped me. His gaze carried no judgment, only in compassion that pierced all the barriers I had built around my heart. The angel revealed truths I had never encountered before, showing me the Jesus crucifixion as a real and historical moment, not as a symbolic event or a fabricated story. I saw his resurrection and finally understood it. The angel guided me to the origins of the early Christian church, where I saw how the gospel spread, igniting hope in people. The angel revealed truths about Jesus' crucifixion that I had never encountered before. It showed me that it was a real and historical moment, not a symbolic event or a fabricated story. I saw his resurrection and finally understood. The angel guided me to the origins of the early Christian church. I saw how the gospel spread, igniting hope in a broken world. Then, I was shown how other religions, including Islam, distort and twist these truths. I witnessed scenes that exposed the true origins of Islamic teachings. These moments were shaped by human ambition and political power, not by divine revelation. The angel did not show me these things with hatred or condemnation. It did so with the intention of teaching me the truth. It was as if a veil had been lifted from my eyes. It revealed a clearer picture of the world and its spiritual history. I saw how Satan had carefully created belief systems designed to turn people away from God's truth. These systems took advantage of order and structure, turning religious devotion into chains that bound. It became painfully clear that although many had sought God with sincere hearts, they had unknowingly embraced deception. The angel then took me to a place that resembled a vast library. I saw a vast library, not with books, but with the lives of people, their actions in paths that could have been, if different choices had been made. I saw alternative versions of my own life, one where my brother and I grew up without false beliefs, another where my parents became leaders, guiding others to true spirituality instead of trapping them in empty traditions. These visions were breathtaking, but also heartbreaking. I saw my life in the lives of others as they could have been if I had known the truth earlier. I saw friends who I encouraged to be more devout in Islam, neighbors I had invited to the mosque, and even my own brothers whom I had taught to reject Christian beliefs. Among them, I saw religious leaders I had respected who had led thousands astray. Their suffering was magnified by the weight of each soul they had led astray. I saw the impact of my own choices on others. I saw the most difficult revelation of all. Even in their agony, they recognized the justice of their cause. The angel also showed me millions of Muslims praying fervently, but their prayers seemed to hit an impenetrable ceiling of brass. I heard their prayers, but they were to a false understanding of him. Satan had used their sincerity against them by keeping them trapped in religious rituals while diverting them from the true salvation found through faith in Jesus Christ. The angel finally revealed a vision of my own future. If I chose to return via the rejection I would face from my Muslim community, from accusations of betrayal to the possibility of being labeled mentally ill by my own family, but I also saw lives transformed by my testimony. I saw people freed from the same chains that had bound me. The angel made it clear that the road ahead would be difficult, but eternally meaningful. Part of me desperately wanted to stay in that place of peace and love. Overwhelming. But then the angel showed me the faces of the people who would be touched by my story, including my family. At that moment, I knew what I had to do. Before he sent me back, the angel gave me a final vision. I saw my own judgment day. But this time it was different. I heard Jesus say, "Good and faithful servant." I knew I would face suffering in the future, but I felt a surge of joy at the thought. Returning to my body was like being forced through a narrow tunnel. I felt the pain of chest compressions, and the glow of the heavenly light began to appear. When I opened my eyes in the ambulance, the hospital lights seemed blinding and harsh in comparison to the light I had just left. The first face I saw was my mother, tears streaming down her face as she held my hand. My father was nearby, his eyes red from crying. The doctors called my survival a miracle, observing how rare it was for victims of carbon monoxide poisoning to recover. But I knew it wasn't luck or coincidence. I was alone, and I told my family what I had experienced. My mother dismissed it as due to the lack of oxygen. My brothers exchanged worried glances, struggling to reconcile my words with the person they had always known, devout, obedient, and unwavering in her faith. The first few weeks at home were difficult. My experience spread quickly within our Muslim community. Friends who were once close to our family began to avoid us. The imam visited, suggesting that I might need psychiatric help. Even my grandparents called from Pakistan, begging to stop talking about these things. At first, my father remained patient, assuming it was just a phase. But when I stopped going to the mosque and started visiting a local, everything changed. I began to participate in sacraments and acts of charity, inspired by my new faith. My mother became visibly upset whenever she saw me praying the rosary or reading the Bible. Reading the Bible, I understood verses that had been misinterpreted during my Islamic upbringing. My parents debated how to deal with the situation, and my younger brother, Samir, questioned whether I was experiencing a mental breakdown. Tension was suffocating, but something unexpected began to happen. Members of our community approached me, particularly Muslims with doubts or questions about their faith. I understood the Bible's verses, which had been misinterpreted during my Islamic upbringing. My parents debated how to deal with the situation, and my younger brother, Samir, questioned whether I was experiencing a mental breakdown. Tension was suffocating, but something unexpected began to happen. Members of our community began to approach me, particularly Muslims with doubts or questions about their faith. One admitted that she was secretly attending Christian services and was curious about the sacraments. Despite the rejection I faced, my story began to resonate with those who were looking for answers. My older sister, Ira, was the first in my family to really listen. At first skeptical, she began to ask deeper questions. Gradually, her curiosity turned into interest. A few months later, I received an invitation to share my story in a small church. I was terrified, but as I began to speak, something changed. The words flowed effortlessly, and the people listening were visibly moved. Among them were several Muslims who had come out of curiosity. By the end of that day, 3 decided to accept Christ, expressing their faith through baptism and pledging themselves to lives of service. Now, 2 years later, our house has become an unofficial meeting place for those looking for answers. Every week, people come with their doubts, questions, and personal stories. Some are the words flowed effortlessly, and the people listening were visibly moved. Among them were several Muslims who had come out of curiosity. By the end of that day, 3 of them decided to accept Christ, expressing their faith through baptism and pledging themselves to lives of service. Now, 2 years later, our house has become an unofficial meeting place for those looking for answers. Every week, people come with their doubts, questions, and personal stories. Some are Muslims, others are simply looking for the truth. Even my father, although he hasn't fully embraced my new faith, has changed in subtle but significant ways. Last week, I caught him reading the Gospel of John in secret, thinking I was asleep. The threats and hostility that used to be overwhelming have diminished over time, although I occasionally receive hateful messages online, but they don't bother me anymore. After witnessing, I've witnessed nothing in this life. Temporary seems scary. My greatest joy came just a few months ago when Mira confessed that she had started to pray to Jesus in secret. She told me that she found God's love while reading the Bible I gave her. Now she participates in the sacraments and lives her faith through acts of charity. My younger brother, Brother Samir, is still struggling with everything he's heard, but he's asking questions, good questions. I know God is working in his heart all night long. I thank God for giving me a second chance, not only to live but to help others find the truth. I know my story seems unbelievable, but 2 years ago, I would have dismissed it. I know what I have seen, experienced, and learned to be true. I know the truth. Many people are on the wrong path, just as I was. If even one person finds the truth through my testimony, it will be worth all the loss and suffering I've faced. Life here is temporary, but our decisions have eternal consequences. If this touched your heart, don't wait, share this message with someone who may be looking for answers. Together, we can help light the way for others to find the truth and hope that changes lives.